Look, have you ever heard of Eastern State Penitentiary? Man, this place is a real horror movie set. It started as a prison back in the 1800s, and the idea was to reform the inmates by completely isolating them, like, no contact with the world. You know that absolute silence that makes you think about life? Well, they forced it. But the plan didn't work out very well, and the place turned into a horror show. Over time, it closed. But now it is a tourist spot for people who love to feel a chill down their spine and hear ghost stories. Want to know more? Because it only gets better. Then, back in the 1800s, people in Philadelphia decided that prisons were too normal. Then they had the brilliant idea of creating the Eastern State Penitentiary, which looked more like a haunted castle than a prison, really. The business opened in 1829 and was supposed to be a model prison, where prisoners would reflect on life in total isolation. Because, there's nothing better to fix someone's head than locking them alone in a hole. The architects created a building so sinister that you feel guilty just looking at it. Gigantic walls, narrow windows that barely let light through, and each prisoner had his own private cell from which he could not leave for anything. You know that saying, better alone than in bad company? They took it to the extreme. They believed that total isolation would make criminals reconnect with their morality and change their lives. The irony? They built the place in such an oppressive way that it seemed designed to break a person's soul, not to reform anyone. I bet the prisoners didn't even know what it was like to see a person after a while. Seriously, this place was the definition of forced solitude, like a horror spa. Then comes the torturous genius of the parade, the total isolation regime, also known as let's see who goes crazy first. The prisoners were alone in their cells all the time, and when I say alone, I mean alone. No chatting with your cellmate, zero socialization. It was just you and your thoughts, which, let's face it, in a place like this, must be wonderful company, right? Even sunbathing time, which would theoretically be a moment of respite, was a journey. The prisoner would go out into the courtyard, but to ensure he didn't see anyone, they would put a hood over his head. Look at the vibe. You're there enjoying your walk in the yard, or at least trying to, and all you see is the darkness of your hood as you walk in circles. At the height of the monk style of penance, but without spiritual peace, of course. Oh, and the silence. My friend, the silence was absolute. Nobody spoke, not even the guards. It was like a convent, only with less prayers and more madness. The idea was that the prisoners, isolated and in total silence, would regret their crimes and return to society as exemplary citizens. Because, apparently, staying in a dark hole listening to the echoes of your own mind is the recipe for becoming a better person, right? That, or you leave there having long conversations with the walls. But before continuing, I need to ask you, are you enjoying it? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos and leave a like. And then, over time, as expected, the plan started to go wrong. Eastern State Penitentiary went from model prison to horror show very quickly. The idea that isolation would reform prisoners fell apart when, in reality, they began to lose their sanity. Believe me, being locked alone in a cell, in total silence, turns anyone into the best friend of hallucinations. And then, suddenly, what was supposed to be a place of regeneration became a trauma factory. In 1971, after years of trial and error, they realized that it was all a bit unsustainable. So they closed Eastern State, and the inmates were transferred to less isolating, and probably much more normal prisons. But the story of the place didn't end there, because, like any good sinister building, Eastern State found a second life. Of course, right? Today it is one of the most popular tourist spots for those who want to feel that ghostly atmosphere. Now the place is full of people paying to take a tour and who knows, come face to face with a ghost. There are stories of guards and visitors who swear they saw strange things there, doors that close by themselves, whispers coming from empty cells, that basic horror movie complete package. Today Eastern State is better known as the most famous haunted prison in the US than for any attempt to rehabilitate anyone. I mean, if the prisoners from the past were no longer able to leave there in peace, imagine the ghosts. So, after all this story of psychological horror, hallucinations, and ghosts, Eastern State Penitentiary practically became an amusement park for lovers of the macabre. Was the idea to reform the prisoners? Yes. Did it work? Not at all. But at least they created one of the most sinister and famous places in the United States, right? Today, the place is a tourist spot for those who want to feel that chill down their spine and perhaps have a chat with a lonely ghost. The irony is that the place, which used to be used to isolate criminals, now attracts people who pay to deliberately isolate themselves in the middle of this dark scenario. You'll understand. Anyway, from an innovative prison to a horror movie setting, Eastern State proved that good intentions don't always end well, but at least it makes for some good scary stories. So that's today's video. I hope you liked it. See you in the next story.